Beijing Turmoil, More Than Meets the Eye. Chapter 5, Retrospections After the Storm. The 50-day turmoil in Beijing started on April 15th, when the first wreath for Hu Yaobang appeared at Tiananmen Square, and ended on June 4th, when the last throng of people occupying the square was cleared out, and was finally put down. From June 4th on, the situation in Beijing, as well as in all other parts of the country, has become more stable day by day. People are now drawing lessons from different angles from this painful experience. Why were so many people involved in the turmoil? The most popular topic for discussion is why so many people were involved in the turmoil. During the turbulence, demonstrations took place in 84 medium and large-sized cities, in which quite a number of intellectuals participated, in addition to students. Now, it is well known by all that the turmoil was plotted, organized, and instigated by a handful of people in a vain attempt to subvert the people's government and establish a bourgeois republic in China. The question, however, is how this handful of people could incite such a vast number of students and intellectuals. Objectively, we have made great achievements attracting worldwide attention during the 40 years since the founding of New China, and the fruits China has achieved in its recent 10-year reform and opening to the outside world have put China in the foremost ranks amongst the socialist countries. Why, then, did such a large-scale and long-lasting turmoil take place in China, of all the countries? Looking at the whole course of the turmoil, the political aim of the instigators, clearly enough, was to oppose the government under the leadership of the Communist Party. But how could so many people involved in the turmoil attempt to overthrow the Communist Party and government? Of course, the dregs of society who took advantage of the riot to beat, smash, loot, burn, and kill during the turbulence had a deep-seated hatred for the Communist Party and government. Most of the students, residents, and intellectuals, on the other hand, are quite different from them. There are indeed deep economic, political, social, and ideological causes which could enable such a tiny handful of people to instigate the turmoil. Such a complicated situation resulted from the objective domestic and international social background, and the specific mistakes made by the party and government. People's grievances against corruption. I'd like to begin with the corruption hated by almost everybody. On May 18th, several central leaders went to a hospital to see the students on hunger strike who were being treated there. One of the students excitedly made some remarks. His main points were as follows. China has 4 big problems. First is the large population. Second is the comparatively few natural resources. Third is the low level of education. And fourth is the low level of economic development. The situation in China, according to him, is a hot potato for any party in power. He said, the reality shows that no any other political force can take the place of the Communist Party in China. But now, people have lost confidence in the party. This is because the party has made serious mistakes in its work, resulting in such problems as corruption, official profiteering, and special treatment for the children of senior officials. We hope that the Chinese Communist Party will rejuvenate itself and lead us in building the country for a better future. To regain the people's confidence in the party, it is imperative to begin with members of the party central committee and take vigorous measures to punish corruption and official profiteering. If there are problems involving their own children, they should set an example and take the necessary measures to punish them. Then he asked the leaders whether they agreed with him. Chiao Shi and other leaders nodded and shook hands with him, saying, well said. Many who had watched the video show of the central leader's visit said the remarks made by the students were fine. According to a young university teacher, what the student had said represented the viewpoint of most students. Many supporters of the student unrest shared the same idea. Many complaints of corruption and official profiteering made by the people have been lost upon the government. Now let the students provoke the government to take measures. It was quite successful for the plotters of the turmoil to put forth slogans opposing corruption and official profiteering. And although these slogans merely served as a foil, they were very insightful. This is one of the most important reasons why so many people became involved in the turbulence. Here is a personal experience of mine which can explain something. I once bitterly attacked the corruption of the society as well as the weakness of the government in dealing with it at a seminar on current affairs held between March and April. In the old society, we had joined the revolutionary ranks to oppose corruption and moral degeneration of the KMT government, and now we surely can't stand the people's government not taking effective measures to oppose corruption. Therefore, my remarks inevitably went to extremes and drew the attention of the attendants at the seminar. That is, of course, a normal phenomenon. The turmoil, however, took place soon afterwards. I realized that the students were manipulated and guided by some people behind the scenes, and thus, at another seminar, I advised the attendants not to be naive and criticized the extremist activities of the students. Later, I was told that quite a number of people had complained about me and said, "How come he changes his opinions so soon? Not long ago he opposed corruption strongly, and now he even criticizes the student unrest. How extraordinary." I also felt amazed by this kind of complaint. Must people with complaints against corruption necessarily sympathize with the student unrest? Must opponents of the student unrest necessarily tolerate corruption? Finally, I realized that the reason why those who had complained about me sympathized with the students was because they believed that the motive for the student unrest was to oppose nothing but corruption and official profiteering. They really simplified the complicated class struggle. At the conference of chiefs from various organization departments around the country, Song Ping, the newly elected member of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau of the Party Central Committee, made the following pertinent remarks. During this turbulence, one of the most important reasons enabling a handful of people to hoodwink and incite such a vast number of the masses is the fact that corruption did exist inside the party. It is for this reason that a number of people had lost confidence in the party and government. We must learn the lessons of experiences and make up our minds to solve this problem. August 22, 1989, Xinhua News Agency. Along with the great progress brought about as a result of the policy of reforms and opening to the outside world in recent years, such social problems as corruption, official profiteering, inflation, price rises, and unequal distribution appeared. There are many complicated reasons for the occurrence of these problems, which had aroused strong resentment amongst the masses. The party and government had made great efforts to solve them. Although we had made some impact upon the situation, we hadn't made much headway generally. Why? This had something to do with the former General Secretary Zhao Ziyang. He believed that corruption was an inevitable phenomenon as a consequence of the commercial economy. He tried to defend profiteering engaged in by the children of the senior officials, saying that they were ordinary citizens with equal rights to engage in commercial business and therefore they should not be discriminated against. I was disgusted with what he said at that time. Yes, they are citizens, but they are different from ordinary citizens. They enjoy more favorable conditions for doing business than ordinary citizens. The party and government's misappraisal of Zhao Ziyang prevented them from taking vigorous measures to punish corrupt officials or their relatives. Since the turbulence, the party and government have learnt some serious lessons and have begun to take earnest measures to oppose corruption, although the instigators of the turmoil had already put forth slogans opposing corruptions just as a foil. While the party and government had all along sought to solve the problem, these slogans did reflect the heartfelt wishes of the people. Between July 27th and July 28th, the Political Bureau of the Party Central Committee held a meeting at which it pledged to accomplish 7 tasks, which are all of great concern to the Chinese people in the near future. The tasks are 1. Further clear up and reorganize companies. 2. Resolutely prevent the children of senior officials from engaging in commercial activities. 3. Cancel the special supply of a small variety of foodstuffs to leading officials. 4. Central leaders will all use Chinese cars and import of sedans is strictly forbidden. 5. Strictly forbid entertaining private guests and purchasing gifts with public funds. 6. Strictly limit leading officials to visits to foreign countries. 7. Severely punish criminals involved in corruption, bribe taking, and profiteering, especially big and key cases. People's Daily, July 29th, 1989. This decision has received much welcome. Firstly, The decision makes clear and specific stipulations regarding these problems, which have aroused most popular resentment with respect to creating a clean government and other issues in recent years. Secondly, primary emphasis is placed on the members of the Political Bureau and Secretariat of the CPC Central Committee and leaders of the State Council. This is the problem which the vast masses, including the students on hunger strike who, as earlier cited, made intelligent remarks at the hospital, are most concerned and anxious about. People feel hopeful now because they can see that the party Central Committee has demonstrated its determination to set an example in creating a clean government for the future. Thus, we may ask whether or not the phenomenon of corruption and the mistakes made by the party and government represent the root cause of the turmoil. In my view, these can only be regarded as an important factor accounting for the large numbers of masses involved in the turmoil, but they should not be considered as the root cause of the turmoil itself. Although the Communist Party should never have become corrupt according to its principles, the Chinese Communist Party in power had been free of such kinds of corruption for a long time. It is only in recent years that the corruption cropped up inside the party, and the masses, of course, hated it bitterly. But the corruption inside the party had not in fact developed to such an incurable level as to require the complete overthrow of the party. The people still hoped that the party and government will take vigorous and effective measures to eliminate all corruption and official profiteering within the party and government, and rejuvenate the working style of the party so as to regain the trust of the masses. During the development of the turbulence, the party and government claimed time and again that they took the same stand as the vast masses of patriotic students with regard to eliminating all corruption and official profiteering. The fact that the party and government have taken vigorous measures in creating a clean government in the aftermath of the storm demonstrate that the party and government have been in earnest. Given that there is no root contradiction between the two sides, why should the turbulence have become increasingly serious? In view of this fact, it should thus become clear that corruption could not have been the root cause of the turbulence. Ideological trend of bourgeois liberalization. The root cause of the turbulence was the outcome of the prolonged effects of the influx of the bourgeois liberalization ideological trend into China. The term liberalization comes from the West. From 1953 to 1957, John Foster Dulles, then the Secretary of State of the United States, declared in his speeches that the policy of the United States was to promote the liberalization in the Soviet Union, China, and other socialist countries. The Chinese people oppose Dulles's liberalization, which aims to subvert socialist China. To modify liberalization with the term bourgeois is to distinguish between the definitions of liberty offered by the capitalists on the one hand and the proletarian on the other. Real liberty which does not violate the legal system does not have to be opposed. The ideological trend of bourgeois liberalization is the negation of socialism and the advocation of capitalism. The emergence and development of the trend is long-standing. After the third plenary session of the 11th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China held in late 1978, the emphasis of the work of the party and the state was shifted to socialist modernization. The people who had tasted the full turbulence of the 10-year Cultural Revolution yearned for a political situation of stability and unity favorable to the prosecution of normal construction. From 1979 to 1989, however, the ideological trend of bourgeois liberalization continuously disturbed the policy of reform and opening to the outside world. Disturbances of this sort arose 4 times. The seriousness of the ideological confusion and harm they cause escalated from time to time, culminating in the nationwide turmoil between spring and summer of 1989. The trend first arose in early 1979 when the party and government were negating the turbulent 10-year Cultural Revolution and criticized the mistakes made by Mao Zedong in his later years. Some people seized the opportunity to whip up an unhealthy trend towards opposing Marxism-Leninism, Mao Zedong thought, and negating the leadership of the Communist Party and the socialist system. Raising the banners of democracy, liberty, and human rights, they incited demonstrations, assaulted Zhongnanhai, established illegal organizations, and put out illegal publications. A wall in the Xidan area in Beijing became the center of their reactionary big character and small character posters and slogans. The Xidan Democracy Wall became a forum for them to state their bourgeois liberalist views. A China human rights group went so far as to put up a big character poster asking the President of the United States to show solicitude for the human rights in China. Some of the members of a democracy symposium slandered Chairman Mao Zedong and advocated resolute and thorough criticism of the Communist Party of China. At a forum held to discuss the principles for the party's theoretical work, some people fell into ideological confusion and demonstrated some wrong views. In view of this situation, Deng Xiaoping, on behalf of the Party Central Committee at the Forum on March 3, 1979, made an important speech entitled, "Uphold the Four Cardinal Principles." He said, quote, "As we all know, far from being new, these four cardinal principles have long been upheld by our party. The Central Committee holds that today the four cardinal principles must be emphasized repeatedly and adhered to, because some people, even though it is only a few people, attempt to shake these fundamental principles. This attempt will not be permitted under any circumstances." End quote. In December 1980, Deng Xiaoping, at a Central Working Conference, warned again, quote, "Recently, people associated with illegal organizations have been especially active. They have seized on all kinds of pretexts to make unrestrained anti-party and anti-socialist statements. These are danger signals that should put the whole party, all our youth, and the entire people on the alert." End quote. The ideological trend arose again after 1983, when spiritual pollution seeped into the theoretical circles and the literary and art circles. Of course, theoretical workers, writers, and artists should be the engineers of the human soul and use their works, teaching, and speeches to encourage the people to work hard, make progress, serve the people, and devote themselves to the glorious cause of the socialist modernizations. However, running counter to the demands of the historical period and the people, some of them sought to contaminate the people's soul with their unhealthy ideas, works, and performances. The central point of the spiritual pollution is to spread various capitalist and other exploiting classes' corruption and decadent ideas, and to disseminate distrust of the Communist Party and the socialist system. A few theoretical workers disagreed with the conclusions on many important questions drawn in the resolutions on certain questions in the history of our party since the founding of the People's Republic of China, and spread the view that alienation had taken place in socialism in its various fields, thus attempting to produce theoretical foundations with which to negate the socialist system. They also publicized abstract humanitarianism, human nature, and democracy, and talked idly about human value in disregard to man's social and class natures. They called for realization of one's own value and advocated selfish individualism in order to undermine the youth's spirit of dedication to the nation. Quite a few unhealthy and a few reactionary works came out from the world of art and literature. On account of this situation, Deng Xiaoping, at the second plenary session of the 12th Central Committee of the CPC on October 12, 1983, seriously pointed out that people working in the ideological field must not spread spiritual pollution due to the ineffective exercise of leadership of Hu Yaobang, the then General Secretary of the party. The work of eliminating spiritual pollution was left unfinished. In December 1984, Hu Yaobang said to the preparatory group for the Third Congress of the Chinese Writers Association that there was no need to bring up the subject of opposing spiritual pollution and bourgeois liberalization at the Congress, since the ideological trend of liberalization was then running rampant in the world of literature. The practical result of the directive was to support and encourage the people who advocated liberalization in the literary circles. This made the ideological trend of bourgeois liberalization spread even more rampantly in the field of art and literature and the theoretical circles. The third time for the trend to spread unchecked was around 1986, this time led by Fang Lizhi, Wang Ruo Wang, Liu Binyan, and others who stubbornly clung to bourgeois liberalization. Although they were communists personally, they made speeches and published articles wantonly vilifying the four cardinal principles. Fang Lizhi made a speech at Tongji University and declared, "From Marx and Lenin to Stalin and Mao Zedong, orthodox socialism has been a failure." He proposed that China become totally westernized. Some people said that the building of socialism in China attempted to transcend the historical conditions, and that the missed lesson of capitalism must be made up. In the Shenzhen Youth Daily, one person expressed the view that to reform was to change the leadership of the exclusive party. At one time, views and ideas negating the leadership of the Communist Party were crowded into newspapers and magazines. Under these circumstances, the Chinese University of Science and Technology, where Fang Lizhi held a post, aroused a student strike, which spread throughout the country. During that time, there were slogans opposing the leadership of the Communist Party and socialism. The Central Committee of the party took resolute measures to quiet the student unrest and decided to carry out education throughout the whole country in adherence to the four cardinal principles and opposition to bourgeois liberalization. Fang Lizhi, Wang Ruowang, and Liu Binyan were purged from the party. In the meantime, Hu Yaobang resigned from the post of General Secretary of the party for his ineffective exercises of leadership in opposing bourgeois liberalization. Speaking of the student unrest, Deng Xiaoping incisively pointed out that this was the consequence of the rampant spread of the trend of bourgeois liberalization. He said, quote, "This is not a problem that has arisen in just one or two places or in just the last couple of years. It is the result of failure over the past several years to take a firm, clear-cut stand against bourgeois liberalization. It is essential to adhere firmly to the four cardinal principles. Otherwise, bourgeois liberalization will spread unchecked, and that has been the root cause of the problem." End quote. Instead of drawing the previous lessons and conscientiously carrying out the directive from Deng Xiaoping of opposing bourgeois liberalization, Zhao Ziyang, who took up the post of General Secretary of the party, took a passive attitude and created various obstacles to restrict and even revoke the struggle against bourgeois liberalization. He declared on May 13, 1987, at a conference of propaganda, theoretical press, and party school cadres that bourgeois liberalization has lost its open market, and that the situation of the rampant spread of bourgeois liberalization has been reversed. The instructions about opposing bourgeois liberalization were thereafter hastily wound up. After this, those people like Fang Lizhi, Wang Ruowang, and Liu Binyan, who had been criticized for advocating bourgeois liberalization, came back on the stage to write articles, make speeches, and, on invitation, give lectures abroad. They became the favorites of a number of people at the time. They were doubly desperate in publicizing theories and views on liberalization. Zhao Ziyang protected and enlisted some people who upheld liberalization to form his own brain trust. They had control of the Research Institute for Reform of the Economic System, the Research Institute of Development of the Agricultural Research Center, the Research Institute for International Affairs of the China International Trust and Investment Corporation, and the Beijing Young Economist Society. Meanwhile, they further put the media battlefront under their control, especially using the World Economic Herald, the Economic Weekly, and the New Observer fortnightly. They used all their skill to publicize the ideas, theories, and views of bourgeois liberalization and produced very bad influence. On the other hand, Zhao Ziyang employed dishonest means to exclude, inhibit, and attack those who stuck to Marxism and opposed liberalization. As a result, the fourth period of the spread of the bourgeois liberalization trend became much more frenzied from 1988 to 1989. The fourth period of the rampant spread of bourgeois liberalization looked like a voracious sea which swept across various fields including politics, economics, art and literature, and the social sciences. Bourgeois views of all descriptions on philosophy, politics, and literature, and art, and bourgeois outlooks on life, morality, values came forth. These theories and views had some differences from the trend of liberalization that directly opposed the four cardinal principles. For instance, all is for money, equal to money worship, and all is for realization of one's own values, equal to individualism, and other bourgeois ideas cannot be equated with bourgeois liberalization, but individualism and money worship are antagonistically and diametrically opposed to socialist ideology. Once individualism and money worship have run wild, they will inevitably become the spiritual force which will shake and crush socialism and make the people infatuated with capitalism. During this period, the She-Ko turbulence and the River Elgi craze occurred. These both impressed me deeply. The so-called She-Ko turbulence actually was created by several newspapers and magazines. On January 13, 1988, several noted youth education specialists visited Shenzhen and attended a symposium held in She-Ko by She-Ko youth. The two sides could not see eye to eye with each other on certain questions. This is, of course, not uncommon. It is a common thing to exchange different ideas and argue with one another. However, on February 1st, 1988, a local newspaper carried the news headlined, "Youth Education Specialists Challenged by Youth." In an important place on the first page, the newspaper also published in March and April 2 articles entitled She-Ko, Sharp Conflict Between Stale Preachments and Current Ideas, and The Culture of God Completely Stifles People. These reports attracted wide attention. Several other newspapers and magazines also launched attacks on the youth education specialists, following the newspaper in Shoukou, proposing that the specialists were people like preachers inculcating cliches into youth who had current ideas and that this sort of instruction would never do in the time of reform and openness to the outside world, and so on. On August 6, 1988, the People's Daily published a report, Questions and Answers on the Shoukou Turbulence. This report was seemingly impartial, but in fact was obviously tendentious. Someone compared the report to a heavy bomb which pushed the turbulence to a new high. Hundreds of other newspapers also published articles on this matter, and some noted persons from theoretical, cultural, and press circles joined the discussion as well. They generally leaned to the side against the youth education specialists. What is the conflict between the stale preachments and the current ideas? I attentively read a lot of commentaries and drew a conclusion. In brief, the spirit of devoting all to the country, the nation, and the people was calumniated as stale preachments, but all is for making money, and there is nothing to ideals, beliefs, and devotion to the motherland were extolled as current ideas. At that time I was filled with indignation at, and felt strange about, the fact that some people in the name of reform wantonly advocated the bourgeois world and value outlooks in socialist China. It was not understandable to many people that even the People's Daily got involved. Of course, the bourgeois world and value outlook cannot be equated with bourgeois liberalization, which directly opposes socialism, but it is obvious that they have connections with each other. Those who devoutly believe in money worship cannot be firmly convinced of socialism. Almost at the same time, the River LG, a 6-part TV series, came out into the open and made an unexpectedly great furor inside and outside the country. The broadcast of River LG by CCTV was started in June 1988. It reviews Chinese history and culture as portrayed by the Yellow River in a novel style. The series had a strong appeal to the audience just because of this unique style. After having watched only 2 parts of the series, I could not continue. The makers of the series were continuously laughing at and speaking sarcastically about the ancestors of China. Amidst the applause, I forced myself to find the written commentaries of the series and intensively read them time and again on a 3-day train ride to Kunming. I also read many of the reviews given by TV viewers and personages from the cultural circles. I made up my mind to be as objective as possible and to be never restricted by my personal feelings. However, good is good and bad is bad. In the end, I drew the conclusion that, though River LG had brought forth some new ideas to production of TV series, I am not able to agree to the general views it advocates. I disagree most with the view propagated in River LG, which totally negates Chinese civilization. The authors, time and again, vilify the excellent cultural traditions of China that the Yellow River breeds. For example, quote, "New culture is unable to be bred in the yellow soil and the Yellow River. It is impossible for a completely new civilization to run out from the Yellow River. This vast yellow land cannot tell us what is genuine scientific spirit. The unruly Yellow River cannot tell us what is genuine democratic consciousness," end quote. According to the filmmakers, China's ancient history and civilization is determined by geographical conditions. Unlike the United States, which is flanked by 2 oceans, China is a closed continent. This determines that Chinese civilization is closed, backwards, and conservative. I also disagree with the praises and eulogies in River LG to Western civilization. River LG utilizes symbolism to entitle Chinese civilization as a yellow civilization, and yet to entitle the Western or capitalist civilization as an azure oceanic civilization. The yellow civilization is condemned as worthless, and the azure oceanic civilization is praised as having magical strength. River LG says, quote, "Although in an inland civilization with its dominant mode has the capacity for modern scientific achievement in the modernization program, such as even the launching of artificial satellites and the explosion of an atomic bomb, it still is absolutely unable to radically endow the whole nation with a strong, vigorous civilization. Only when the azure oceanic wind turns into rain to moisten again the drought yellow land can the vast Loess Plateau derive a chance of revitalization," end quote. Here the authors, in a roundabout way, indicate unequivocally their idea that China should take the capitalist road. Quote, "Chinese history has not brought up a middle-class bourgeoisie for Chinese people to give impetus to the victory of science and democracy," end quote. In addition, River LG cites Plekhanov to bear out that it was too early for the October Socialist Revolution under the leadership of Lenin to capture political power, and that the process transcended the necessary stage of development of capitalism and made the economy a most disastrous failure. So, according to it, the only way out is to come back and make up the missed lessons of capitalism. While River Elegy only utilizes art forms to beat about the bush about its idea that the reform and openness in China should take the road of total westernization and capitalism, after 1988, people from the intellectual circles in their articles and speeches flagrantly made public their political stand for overthrowing the socialist republic and establishing a bourgeois republic in China. At a seminar held on December 7, 1988, Jean Guantao, research fellow at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, said publicly that, quote, attempts at socialism and their failure constitute one of the two major legacies of the 20th century, end quote. Ge Yang, chief editor of the fortnightly New Observer, added inflammatory details to what Jin had said, quote, the development of socialism has its own laws. Socialism constitutes idealism and it is feudalism by nature. The feudal emperor is its chieftain. Jin's negation of socialism is not harsh enough, but a bit too polite, end quote. On March 1, 1989, a big character poster entitled Denunciation of Deng Xiaoping, A Letter to the Nation, was put up at Tsinghua and Beijing universities simultaneously. The poster uttered such nonsense as, quote, the politics of the Communist Party consists of empty talk, power, autocracy, and arbitrary decision-making, end quote, and openly demanded, quote, dismantling the party and abandoning the four cardinal principles, end quote. On the campuses of Beijing University and other schools of higher learning on March 29th, there was extensive posting of Fang Lijie's article, China's Disappointment and Hope, written for the Hong Kong Mingpao Daily News. In the article, Fang claimed that socialism had completely lost its attraction, and there was the need to form political pressure groups to carry out reforms for political democracy and economic freedom. The big character poster, Call of the Times, that came out in Beijing University on April 6th, questioned in a manner of complete negation whether there is any rationale now for socialism to exist, and whether Marxism-Leninism fits the realities of China after all. The protagonists of bourgeois liberalization also played up private ownership as against socialist public ownership in the economic field. Fang wrote an article for Hong Kong Times on June 14, 1988, saying that the basic path of China's reform is to transform public ownership into private ownership. The World Economic Herald, which had exerted all its strength in preaching private ownership since May 1988, carried an article on February 6, 1989, saying that in view of the increase in private ownership, the problems cropping up in the reform as well as the solution to them are much easier to deal with than people have expected. These represent the thorough realization of private ownership and ownership on a non-government basis. Besides publicity given by the mass media, the Democratic Salon Freedom Forum, as well as various kinds of seminars, symposiums, and lectures, mushroomed in Beijing's institutions of higher learning. The students and young teachers took the new ideological trend as the most fashionable topic and indulged in the use of new words and phrases. They willfully found faults with the party and government without doing much research on the current social problems. Under such circumstances, in such an inflammatory atmosphere, many people working at the colleges and universities felt that something untoward would happen. Su Xiaokang, the main author of River Elegy, who was very active in the turmoil, wrote a thought-provoking article on April 5th in which he said, quote, the year 1989 is destined to be a singular memorial year which meets many historical giants. It is the bicentenary of the French Revolution, the centenary of the founding of the Second International, the 70th anniversary of the May 4th Movement, the 70th anniversary of the founding of the Third International, the 40th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China, the 30th anniversary of the Lushan Conference, the 20th anniversary of the 9th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, the 20th anniversary of the death of Liu Shaoqi, and so on. No one can escape these coming days of the year which may make you happy or unhappy, one way or the other. Wenhui Monthly, number 5, 1989, end quote. What he has said above in a roundabout way means nothing other than, we will find an anniversary to create a disturbance. No one can escape. Those plotting the turmoil originally chose the 70th anniversary of the May 4th movement as the day to launch an attack. The sudden death of Hu Yaobang on April 15th gave them the best opportunity to put forth the slogans of totally negating the anti-bourgeois liberalization movement, on the pretext of mourning Hu. Then, the turmoil broke out ahead of the scheduled time. Representatives of bourgeois liberalization. As stated earlier, there was a sharp confrontation between bourgeois liberalization and the four cardinal principles from the very beginning of the turmoil. In addition, in terms of the whole course of the turmoil, most of those plotting behind the scenes were those who stubbornly persisted in bourgeois liberalization. Fang Lizhi and his wife, regarded as dissidents by some foreigners, were in direct command of the student leaders. It was they who successfully changed the emphasis of the April 27th demonstration to opposing corruption and official profiteering. Another key plotter behind the turmoil was Yan Jiaqi, formerly research fellow at the Institute of Political Science under the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, who was active in 1979 when bourgeois liberalization first emerged on the political scene. He used to major in physics and later studied philosophy. In 1980, he started to engage in political research. The main results of his research are contained in the following 3 books: The 10-Year History of the Cultural Revolution, On Leaders, and My Ideological Autobiography. His basic political idea is to learn from the West and implement the separation of judicial, legislative, and executive powers, and impose limits upon governmental power. He also holds that Marxism is a closed type of ideological system, and that to defend Marxism is to defend Chinese feudal culture. He was adulated as a new-style politician, political elitist, theoretical authority on political structural reform, and representative of the liberal intelligentsia. In May, he emerged from behind the scenes and came to visit Tiananmen Square in person, where he made speeches and declarations. He gave counsel to the student leaders. After June 4th, he fled abroad and co-organized the anti-government Chinese Democracy Front, together with Wu Kai-shi and Wan Runan, to the acclaim of the reactionary forces in the United States, France, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. Wan Runan, now Secretary General of the reactionary Chinese Democracy Front, was also very vociferous during the turmoil. He used to be the general manager of the Stone Company. One of his confidants said, "It is now widely claimed that our Stone has become the logistics department, staff department, and command headquarters of the student movement. Wan Runan deserves all the praise." The task of the Stone Company was to develop high technology, and Wan gained fame for being honored as an entrepreneur because of the wide renown of the company. However, his eyes were focused more on political issues than on science and technology or economics. He held that China called for private ownership, and to solve the problem of ownership was, in his words, a matter outside the field of economic reform, having become a problem for political reform as well. In his mind, the aim of political reform was to abolish the 4 cardinal principles and introduce parliamentary democracy. Besides, those who masterminded schemes for the student leaders or came out from behind the scenes to perform personally during the turmoil, such as Liu Xiaobo, lecturer at the Beijing Teachers University, Bao Zunxin, associate research fellow at the Institute of History under the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Zhang Xianyang, research fellow at the Institute of Marxism-Leninism, Mao Zedong Thought under the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Jin Guantao, research fellow at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and others, had all long clung to the ideology of bourgeois liberalization. Those so-called student leaders who appeared in the limelight during the turmoil, such as Wang Dan, Wu Kai-shi, and Chai Ling, worshipped the leading members of the bourgeois liberalization greatly, and believed whatever they said. Their minds had been filled with the true scriptures imparted by their teachers, and they preached at every turn that Professor Fang said that or Professor Li warned this. Under the direct guidance of Fang Lizhi and Li Shuxian, Wang Dan sponsored 17 lectures of the Democratic Salon from May 4, 1988 to May 12, 1989, and Bao Zunxin Dai Qing, a reporter with Guangming Daily, and Wu Zhuguang, a playwright, were invited to give lectures preaching to the ideology of bourgeois liberalization. People influenced by the ideological trend of bourgeois liberalization. Quite a number of students and intellectuals who were involved in the turmoil had been influenced by the ideology of bourgeois liberalization in varying degrees. It would be wrong to claim that they had the clear intention of abolishing the Communist Party and socialism, but it would be in keeping with the actual situation to say that they had cherished doubts about the leadership of the Communist Party and the Socialist Road to a certain extent under the impact of bourgeois liberalization. Some of the college students, young teachers, and middle-aged and older intellectuals that I know personally were involved in the turmoil. I have often questioned why they couldn't recognize the real situation. They meant to eliminate all corruption, but they lacked any sense of class struggle and failed to realize that reactionary forces, both at home and abroad, would certainly get involved in this struggle. Besides, under the impact of bourgeois liberalization over recent years, they had come to accept part of the erroneous viewpoints. Thus, they responded sympathetically to some of the slogans spread at Tiananmen Square to a certain extent. Let us take an example. I once talked with one of my friends about the fasting students who were reluctant to leave the square, and I said, "If the turmoil goes on like this, it will certainly hamper the development of socialist construction." My friend obviously disagreed with me and rose from his chair, saying amidst gestures, "History will prove that the patriotic activities of the students have promoted the development of democracy in China." Our conversation grew disagreeable and soon stopped. The next day this friend took to the streets and joined in the supporting demonstration. It was reasonable both for him to speak and act in this way. He had long been flaunting the fact that he had emancipated his mind and was bold in accepting new things. Actually, he was just bold in accepting the viewpoints of bourgeois liberalization, then prevalent in society, which pleased his ears. For instance, when the TV series River Elegy, appreciated by Zhao Ziyang, was praised to the skies, he also sang songs of praise for it. As soon as the Shekou turbulence appeared, he supported it. However, I know that he didn't intend to oppose the Communist Party and socialism. He merely believed that the Communist Party was too conservative and should become more enlightened, and that the practice of socialism had not been so successful, and we should therefore learn something from the successes of capitalism. Those who hold the above-mentioned viewpoints are apt to fall captive to the ideological trend of bourgeois liberalization. Many of the students involved in the unrest and turmoil had been influenced by the bourgeois liberalization trend, but they were different in essence from those who persevered with the movement towards bourgeois liberalization. A contributor who is well acquainted with the college students' thinking analyzed their thought as follows. Patriotic fervor and political innocence, as well as the patriotic enthusiasm and extreme sentiment, exist in the thinking of the students like two pairs of twins. In recent years, owing to the influx of the bourgeois liberalization trend into China, views pertaining to the innate superiority of capitalism and the innate inferiority of socialism could be heard everywhere, resulting in a very abnormal ideological atmosphere with respect of the public opinion at large. Some elements of bourgeois ideology, such as the abstract concepts of democracy, freedom, and human rights, have made imprints in the students' minds through various channels, poisoning them to varying degrees. For the past few years, the lack of a Marxist political education combined with the mistakes resulting from the reforms and the policy of opening to the outside world, which have also resulted in remarkable achievements, have together aggravated such social problems as overheated economic development, skyrocketing prices, obvious inflation, unequal social distribution, official profiteering, and corruption, and have, as a consequence, given rise to some serious grievances. All these factors have combined to make a significant impact upon the students. As a result, a sizable proportion of the students have lost confidence in the party, Marxism, Leninism, and the socialist system, feeling disheartened about the future of the country and the destiny of the nation. They desire to discover other panaceas than socialism for eliminating those long-standing abuses of society. Given such dire spiritual circumstances, the views of bourgeois liberalization started to please and suit the tastes of many people who never considered them seriously. Some people were innocently of the impression that no matter whether it were capitalism or socialism, private ownership or public ownership, it would be worth trying so long as it could help accelerate the development of the country's economy and rapidly bring relief to the most poverty-stricken and backward elements within the country. This kind of political naivete made them easy targets to be misled and become involved in the turmoil, unwittingly and to varying degrees. Furthermore, a very small handful of people with ulterior motives cooked up and spread various political rumors which led many students astray. Thus, a few of them engaged in activities which have since saddened their friends and gladdened their enemies, whilst some even went so far as to pay the penalty through their own bloodshed. But the greatest tragedy of all lies in the fact that they even believed that all these actions were committed in the name of patriotism. C. Li Zheng. Why did honest and kind patriotic intentions change into their opposite? People's Daily, July 28, 1989. With regard to the bad results coming from the bourgeois liberalization, it is worth mentioning the deleterious impact it was able to exert on press circles. The incorrect guidelines given by some newspapers and periodicals at the central level, such as the People's Daily, caused quite a large number of the public to misunderstand the party Central Committee's line on the student unrest. giving them the mistaken impression that they in fact supported it when they did not, and thus leading many of them to become mistakenly involved in the turmoil. Such incorrect guidelines were the result of bourgeois press freedom, which had long been preached in press circles by the representatives of bourgeois liberalization. But in reality, where is there pure press freedom anywhere in the world? Take the Voice of America, the mouthpiece of the American government. It has the freedom to incite political and social turmoil in China, but does it have equal freedom to oppose such turmoil? Drawing inference from this, the People's Daily, as the representative organ of the party's Central Committee, surely should not have the freedom to support the turmoil. Lessons paid for in blood. An important cause of the emergence of corruption and the widespread of bourgeois liberalization is the errors in party and government work. If the internal cause of the turmoil is not sought from within, from the mistakes made by the party, and if the party does not resolutely decide to readjust its working style, then a similar turmoil will reemerge one day when the external climate is ripe. It is with such an idea in my mind that I felt relieved when I read the important speech on party building made by Song Ping, a member of the Politburo Standing Committee, August 22, 1989, Xinhua News Agency. From this speech, I learned that the Communist Party has recognized the challenge of party building out of the turmoil and resolutely decided to make the necessary adjustments. Song Ping first pointed out that the suppression of the rebellion demonstrated that the party is combat-worthy and invincible. After that statement, he went on to point out sharply that, from its inception, outbreak, and escalation right up until its final development into counter-revolutionary rebellion, the root cause of the whole thing exists primarily inside the party itself. What he has said should not be taken lightly, and has deep significance worth pondering upon. He continued to say, Comrade Zhao Ziyang, as General Secretary of the party, made the dual mistake of supporting the turmoil and splitting the party at the most crucial moment for the party and nation, and he thus bears the unshirkable responsibility for the emergence and development of the turmoil. Many of the instigators, plotters, and organizers and commanders of the turmoil were party members. This means that some people inside the party colluded with those outside the party to oppose the party. After all, the easiest way to capture a fortress is from within. Many people of goodwill originally feared that the party and government would attribute the widespread of the ideological trend of bourgeois liberalization as the root cause of the turmoil after the suppression of the rebellion and fail to combat all corruption seriously or tried their best to regain prestige among the masses. Thus, the danger of recurring turmoil would still exist. But after reading the speech made by Song Ping, all of my friends felt relieved. Now, there is hope of a stable situation and no fear of foreign pressure, so long as the party has determined resolutely to consolidate itself. The most important work to be done in party consolidation is, of course, the dismissal of Zhao Ziyang as General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party and the creation of a new organ of central leadership. What, then, were the main mistakes made by Zhao Ziyang? The main mistakes made by Zhao Ziyang. His most important mistake was to support the turmoil in both word and deed. As the party's general secretary, he ought to have led the whole party in curbing the turmoil. However, he opposed the will of the entire party by supporting the turmoil openly. This was a really big mistake. In his long report to the Standing Committee of the 7th National People's Congress on June 30th, 1989, Chen Shitong, state councilor and mayor of Beijing, listed the various mistakes made by Zhao Ziyang at different stages during the turmoil. Here, I will outline the main ones. From the time of the death of Hu Yaobang on April 15th up until the conclusion of his memorial service on April 22nd, the student unrest developed into turmoil. The Beijing Municipal Party Committee repeatedly suggested to Zhao Ziyang that the central leadership should discuss measures to check the development of the situation, but Zhao Ziyang kept avoiding making a serious analysis or holding a discussion about the nature of the matter. At the end of the memorial meeting for Hu Yaobang comrades in the central leadership again suggested to Zhao that a meeting be held before his visit to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea on April 23rd. Instead of accepting this suggestion, Zhao went to play golf as if nothing had happened. When he was in Korea, he agreed to the definition of the nature of the turmoil as made in the April 26th editorial of the People's Daily. After he returned, he once again expressed his agreement. 2 days later, however, he suddenly accused the April 26th editorial of giving incorrect definition to the nature of the turmoil and suggested that it should be corrected, but in vain. When he met with representatives attending the annual meeting of the Asian Development Bank on the afternoon of May 4th, he expressed a whole range of views diametrically opposed to the spirit of the April 26th editorial. At a time when the turmoil had already been unleashed, he claimed that there would be no big turmoil in China. When a host of facts had proven that the essence of the turmoil represented the complete negation of the leadership of the Communist Party and the socialist system, he still proclaimed that they are by no means opposed to our fundamental system. Rather, they are asking us to correct mistakes in our work. Although facts had shown that a handful of people were making use of the student unrest to instigate turmoil, he merely said that it was hardly avoidable for some people to take advantage of this, thus totally negating the correct judgment of the party Central Committee that a handful of people were fermenting turmoil. His speech exacerbated the mood of the plotters and organizers behind the turmoil, and thus represented the turning point in the further development of the turmoil. As the situation became increasingly more serious, Zhao Ziyang continued to incite press circles to make the worsening situation still worse as a result of incorrect guidance of public opinion. On May 6th, he said the press had opened up a bit and there had been reports about the demonstrations. According to him, there was no big risk involved in opening up a bit by reporting the demonstrations and increasing the openness of the news. He even said, confronted with the will of the people at home and the progressive trend worldwide, we could only guide our actions according to circumstances. As a result, the People's Daily and many other national newspapers and periodicals adopted an attitude of full acknowledgement and active support of the demonstrations, sit-in, hunger strike, and mass support for the students. It made a vast number of readers misunderstand the Party Central Committee's position, giving them to understand that the Party Central Committee did itself support the turmoil. This is one of the most important reasons for so many people having been involved in the turmoil. Zhao Ziyang took advantage of his opportunity of meeting Gorbachev on May 16th to deliberately direct the fire of criticism at Deng Xiaoping and to make the situation even worse than it already was. He said, Comrade Deng Xiaoping's hellmanship is still needed for the most important issues. Since the 13th National Party Congress, we have always reported to Comrade Deng Xiaoping and asked for his advice while dealing with the most important issues. He also said that this was the first public disclosure regarding the decision-making process of the Communist Party of China. Immediately after this, talk with Gorbachev was publicized, voices hoarse with such calls as gerontocratic politics must end and the autocrat must resign could be heard at Tiananmen Square. The high tide of the anti-Deng storm began. On May 17th, members of the Politburo Standing Committee met to discuss the issue of declaring martial law in parts of Beijing. A person who worked beside Zhao Ziyang told the leaders of the illegal student organization that the troops were about to crack down on them, that all others had agreed, and Zhao Ziyang was the only one who was against it. On the evening of May 19th, the meeting was called by the central authorities and attended by cadres from the party government and military institutions in Beijing, declaring that the troops would march towards the city proper. Zhao Ziyang refused to attend the meeting. By doing so, he openly revealed his attitude of boycotting the party before the public. Zhao Ziyang's mistakes lay not merely in supporting the turmoil. According to the communique of the fourth plenary session of the CPC 13th Central Committee, although he did some things beneficial to the reform, the opening of China to the outside world, and to economic work when he held principal leading posts within the party and the government, he obviously erred with respect of providing guidelines and with respect of practical work. Especially after taking charge of the work of the Central Committee, he took a passive approach to adhering to the four cardinal principles and opposing bourgeois liberalization, and he gravely neglected party building, cultural and ethical development, and ideological and political work, causing serious losses to the party's cause. Thus, the session decided to dismiss him from his post and look more closely into his case. The newly elected central leadership of the party, with General Secretary Jiang Zemin at its core, is now paying special attention to party building. This is undoubtedly because it has drawn a lesson in blood from the turmoil. I believe that the possibility of running the country well and providing permanent peace and security for the people exists so long as the party building is implemented throughout all echelons, right the way from the top to the very bottom, and is reviewed regularly. The international climate. Deng Xiaoping, chairman of the Central Military Commission, made a profound summary of the cause of the turbulence in Beijing as follows. The storm was bound to occur sooner or later, as determined by the international and domestic climate. It was inevitable and was independent of man's will. It was simply a matter of time and scale. Speech delivered on June 9, 1989, in Beijing, to commanders above the corps level of the martial law enforcement troops. What was the international climate which gave rise to the outbreak of the turmoil in Beijing? I think it refers to the process of peaceful evolution promoted by the international bourgeois representatives in all the socialist countries of the world. After the Second World War, a number of socialist countries were founded. Failing to combat the newly emergent socialist countries by means of armed intervention and subversion, the United States and some other Western countries adopted a new policy, that of peaceful evolution. They took as their long-term policy one of urging the liberal forces within the socialist countries to rise up and transform the socialist system themselves. In the early 50s, Dulles publicly declared that they would place their hope of realizing peaceful evolution on the Communist Party leaders of the third and fourth generations. Many socialist countries have been carrying out reform in recent years. The international bourgeois representatives have seized the chance to exert their influence by every possible means and infiltrate the socialist countries politically, economically, and culturally in ideological terms. This includes China, in a vain attempt to lead the reform astray by every means. Our aim of reform is to eliminate all the drawbacks so as to promote our country's modernization and development along the socialist road. But the representatives of the international bourgeoisie want us to dispense with socialism entirely and follow the capitalist road so as to eventually become an appendage of certain capitalist powers. In order to promote peaceful evolution in China, the United States has taken actions in a series of ways. After diplomatic relations with China were established, the United States began to propagate its civilization by sending scholars and professors to China to teach and lecture. We must admit that among these, friendly personalities were not rare, but as far as American foreign policy was concerned, their real purpose was to infiltrate China in the ideological and cultural spheres. An American government organization complacently declared in a document on June 5, 1989, "Judging by the current situation in China, we can say that those professors sent to China have played their part in propagating American civilization and culture, and furthering the process of democratization in China, especially through the dissemination of booklets brought to China amongst the students in Beijing." More than 100 personalities of various circles with influence or potential influence on policies were being invited to visit the United States every year in the hope that some of them might attain high positions within the government someday. To train a pro-American group from amongst the Chinese students studying there was another long-term strategic aim of the United States. The United States also did much to influence those persons who were in some way instrumental in determining Chinese governmental policy. In recent years, some of the leading cadres in organs such as the Central Research Office of Political Structural Reform, the Research Institute for Reform of the Economic System, the Research Institute of Development of the Agricultural Research Center, the Research Institute for International Affairs of the China International Trust and Investment Corporation, the Stone Research Institute of Social Development, the Beijing Young Economist Society, etc., have been taken as important targets to draw over. These young officials, as they were called, had influence on Chinese policy at high levels and have surely contributed to the turmoil as a result of running around on sinister errands and stirring up troubles during the turbulence. The United States did its utmost to foster a pro-American force and their agents, such as Fang Li-zhi. When President Bush visited China for the first time after being elected president, he invited Fang Li-zhi, a political dissident, to attend his farewell banquet. Although this invitation failed, the case itself demonstrates that the American government was obstinately sticking to its stand of publicly supporting the personages of the Chinese bourgeois liberalization trend. Fang Li-zhi did his utmost to stage turmoil in China, and after he had failed, gained protection from the American embassy in Beijing. In addition to Fang, the United States had gathered together those persons who had stirred up trouble on every campus during the course of the political upheaval and turbulence.
in order that they might set up reactionary organizations abroad, which could someday return to the mainland to engage in anti-governmental activities. The Voice of America also played a special role in promoting peaceful evolution. Its Chinese program, which ordinarily propagated Western culture and American lifestyle, thereby engaging in psychological warfare against China, brought all its skill into play during the turmoil and rebellion, instigating and even instructing people ignorant of the true situation to ferment trouble and oppose the Chinese government. On the night of April 20th, the Voice of America broadcast that the Chinese students had planned to go on hunger strike in Tiananmen Square on April 22nd, and this actually represented a notice to the students to do so. May 15th was the scheduled date for talks between the Chinese and Soviet leaders. Prior to this, the Voice of America continuously broadcast that, from the observer's perspective, May 15th would be the ideal time for a mass demonstration in Tiananmen Square, since there would be many foreign reporters covering events there on that day. Thus, abandoning its stance of objective reportage, the Voice of America addressed the Chinese students directly in the name of analyst. It spread a large number of rumors during the 12-hour Chinese program every day. For instance, May 15th, 70,000 workers of the Capital Iron and Steel Company went on strike. May 22nd, Liu Binyan said that more than 100 high-ranking Chinese generals opposed the enforcement of martial law. June 4th, troops moved on to and took over colleges and universities in Beijing by force. June 6th, Deng Xiaoping died. Li Peng was wounded in an assassination attempt by a young officer who killed himself after the incident. The 28th Corps and 38th Corps clashed with the 27th Corps near the military museum. The rumors begun by the Voice of America played a deleterious role for some time, confusing and poisoning people's minds. But ultimately, they invited exposure in the face of the facts, thus revealing that the Voice of America was by no means objective or fair. The turbulence in Beijing taught us a serious lesson. That is to say, we should never underestimate the potentially harmful role played by the policy of peaceful evolution pursued by reactionary forces around the world. However, it is certain that in the days to come we will continue to persist in our policy of reform and opening up to the outside world. We will continue to adopt advanced technology and take full advantage of the management expertise and administration from the advanced capitalist countries. We will continue to conduct broad cultural exchange with other countries and expand our friendly cooperation with people all over the world. But at the same time, we should never relax our vigilance with respect to the policy of peaceful evolution practiced by the world's reactionary political forces. End of Chapter 5.